Okay, guys, I'm hoping you're having a great day. What I want to do over the next couple minutes is just go over some important terminology when we're talking about graphing quadratic functions. And there's four key terms that we need to know for this unit. The first one is what a vertex is, and just a very basic definition of a vertex is it's the highest or lowest point on the graph. In a little bit, you'll hear about the idea of max and min, but that's the same basic idea. So if it's the highest point of my graph, that's an example of a vertex right there. That's the highest point of my graph. The lowest point is going to be something like that. It's the lowest points of my parabola. Now, through a vertex, we have a vertical line of symmetry that goes through the vertex. So what that means is I will have a parabola opening up like this, and here's my vertex. I have a vertical line that goes through the middle of it, and we'll give you examples of that in a second of what that means. Now, x-intercepts is also called zeros and roots, and it's where the graph intersects the x-axis. You've seen that before when we talked about lines last year. The same basic idea applies here. But we'll notice something different about quadratics as opposed to lines. And we'll figure that out. Y-intercepts, well, that's where the graph intersects the y-axis. Same thing. So let's look at a couple graphs. This is an example of a graph. It's 3x squared plus 12x plus 9. What I want to do is I want to be able to identify what the vertex is. And the vertex is the lowest point on the graph. So in this case, my vertex is right there. So my vertex's order pair is going to be the point -2, -3. This is the lowest point on my graph. Now, what happens through that is I also have something called the axis of symmetry that goes through it. If I look at this, if I were to draw a vertical line going right down the middle of the vertex, what you guys would notice is like this point reflects perfectly over to that point. It's a symmetry line. You guys talked last year about reflections and how they're symmetrical, and that's the same idea that applies here. So in this case, the axis of symmetry is a vertical line. Vertical lines always have x equals, because it's the x value that makes it vertical. And in this case, it's going to be x equals -2. That's going to be your line of symmetry, x equals -2. Now, zeros, or x-intercepts. Let's talk about those. Zeros or x-intercepts is where the graph intersects the x-axis. So it intersects once, twice. What are the order pairs of those x-intercepts? Looks like it's -1, 0, and -3, 0. The reason why I'm giving order pairs is because it's a point on the graph where the graph intersects the x-axis. Now, the next thing we want to deal with is the idea of a y-intercept. So in the case of the y-intercept for this graph, it's where the graph intersects the y-axis, which is right here, and it looks like it's at 0, 9, 0, 9. So 0, 9 was your y-intercept for the last graph. So now looking at this one, I want to do exactly the same thing. I want to identify what the x-intercepts, the vertex, and the axis of symmetry is. I'm going to use this color here. So I'm looking for the vertex. In this case, it's a high point on my graph. It's right here at the top. So it looks like my vertex is a maximum, which we'll talk about in the next video. It looks like it's going to be 1, +2 is the vertex. Now we want to identify other key parts of this graph. So let's see the axis of symmetry. So it's a line of symmetry that goes right down the middle of the graph. So in this case, if I draw a vertical line right down the middle, it looks like my vertex has an x value of 1, so the axis of symmetry is going to be x equals 1. Now let's look at the idea of zeros. What are my zeros in my graph? Where does the graph intersect the x-axis? And it looks like it intersects it twice, 1, 2 times, and that looks like it's at 2, 0. And the other one looks like it's at 0, 0. Which is ironic because then that's also the same thing as what the y-intercept is. It's at 0, 0. Okay? That's where the graph intersects the y-axis. So let's look at another scenario right here. I want to do all the things that we did before, so we want to find the vertex. So that looks like it's right here. That looks like the vertex is at 1, 2. Now, the axis of symmetry is a little bit easier now. right down the middle. So it looks like it has an x value of 1 as the axis of symmetry. Now let's talk about the idea of zeros. Does it have any zeros? Does it have any x-intercepts? Well, it looks like right here is my x-axis. It does not look like it intersects the x-axis at all, so there are no zeros. It does not have any x-intercepts. Now, where does the graph intersect the y-axis? Well, that's called the y-intercept. So what are my y-intercept? Well, it looks like it has 1 and sets 0, 3. What I'm going to ask you guys to do is I gave you guys 3 other questions I want you to try, and we will talk about those in a little bit.